My name is Bernard F. Driscoll. Everybody knows me as Barney. The only one that called me Bernard was my mother, but ever since I was in grade school, I've been people called me Barney. And I was raised on a farm in southeastern Iowa. The closest town to our home was a town of Lone Tree, Iowa, and that was where we went to church. Lone Tree was quite a vast metropolitan area. They had about 25 homes there. They had two churches. They had two filling stations. They had two grocery stores. They had two taverns. They had a small bank. They had one barber and a farm implement dealer who was the mechanic of the town, and that pretty much took in the whole town. So that was where I really started was back home. My schooling started out in a one-room country school, old Pleasant Valley number 5. It was a one-room school. There was a total of between 15 and 18 students in the whole school from first grade through the 8th grade. The grade that I was in, we had 3 students. It was myself and 2 girls. One of these girls was pretty sharp. She and I battled for top in this class. The other girl wasn't too swift, but she managed to get by all right. So there was it was just a totally different setup than most people had. One of the things that, well, actually on the grounds, there were 3 buildings other than the school. There was the girls' toilet, the boys' toilet, and the woodshed. And the woodshed had firewood for the school stove, and if we were lucky, we had a few pieces of coal. And there was also a bunch of kindling and corn cobs to get the fire started. The school had no electricity and no running water. Our water came from a hand-operated pump out of the schoolyard, which had a tendency to freeze up in cold weather. If we had any kind of a ceremony or a play or something in an evening at school, several of the families brought their gasoline lanterns, which they could hang from the ceiling to get illumination. There was just a number of things that were totally different than most children have today. We lived a little over a mile from the school, and that is if you went around the road. If we could, we used to cut across one of the neighbors' cattle pastures, which cut down some of it, except they had a mean bull, and if the bull was out, we were on the road. So there's just a number of things that probably the kids today just don't experience. One of the things I would like to point out is, of course, this was back during the days of the Great Depression, and people think they're poor today. They don't know what poor is. There was very little of anything. You had a pair of shoes that you wore to school or you wore to church. The rest of the time you went barefooted to save those shoes. So there was just a lot of things that were totally different than they are today. On the farm, there was times when you needed extra help, and there was no money to buy help, hire help. So I wound up driving a farm-haul tractor when I was 12 years old. And then, of course, as time progressed and I got to be 13 and 14, I got a pretty good experience. A lot of them, I hired out from some of the neighbors to operate tractors for them. And a lot of these old farmers that had been farming with horses all their lives, they weren't real handy with the tractor. They were happy to get some young squirt that could handle it. So anyway, I did accumulate a little money that way. I made $1 a day. If it was a real long day, some days I got $1.50. So that was a part of my experience. I don't know how much interest that is to people, but one of the things I did want to mention was the fact that later on I went to high school in the city of Iowa City, which was about 15 miles from the house. I drove a Model A Ford, and later, after I had accumulated enough money from tractor driving, with the help of my dad, I was able to buy a 1933 Chevrolet Sport Coupe, which cost $90. And there's just a number of things. Driving tractors for different neighbors, it was a good experience. I drove not only farmholes, but Allis-Chalmers and John Deere and Case. Different farmers had different tractors, and they were all, at that time, all tractors you had to crank them to start them. They had to have magneto ignition. This was before they had starters on them. So you had to crank them, with the exception of the John Deere. The John Deere, with its old cross motor, and it had a flywheel on the left-hand side. You turned to get this thing started. The difference in different tractors were the fact that the Allis-Chalmers and the Farmall both had a foot clutch. The John Deere and the Case had a hand clutch. Of course, on the Case, you pulled back on the lever to engage the clutch. On the John Deere, you pushed forward on the lever. So there was a number of differences. So it was a good experience. So really, I led a rather uneventful life, really, until when I was got out of high school, and I was going to be 18 years old, and there was rumors that they were going to start drafting 18-year-olds. I had thought about getting into cadets, but I was under the special. You had to have 2 years college to get into cadets, which I didn't have. So I was going to volunteer for the Air Force and be an aircraft mechanic. And when this rumor of going to draft 18-year-olds, my dad, who had been drafted in World War I and wound up as a member of the 90th Infantry Division in the trenches over in France, said, if you're going to go, you better go. So which I did. So I had to go down to Camp Dodge, Iowa, to enlist. This was near Des Moines. So I climbed on a train in Iowa City, the old Rock Island Rocket, for my trip to Des Moines. And I had never been over 100 miles from home in my life. And this was the first time I'd ever ridden on a train. So I got down to Des Moines. I got off at Des Moines, and at the station, there were some Army people there who give you a brief interview and then told you where to catch a truck out to the base. So which I did, and so I met 2 other men on the, or boys, I guess, really, on the train who were also going down to enlist. So I don't really know whatever happened to them. One of them wound up, I think, in the engineers, and I don't know what happened to the other one. But anyway, after going through the preliminaries and everything, on December 8th, 1942, I was sworn into the Army Air Force. And it was, from that point on, we went through all kinds of getting shots and this and that and the other thing, and lectures. They made a great point of pointing out in their lectures that you had to be a little cautious about strange women that you met, and use a certain degree of judgment, you know. So they emphasized that quite extensively. So really, we were issued uniforms and all, and our civilian clothes we packed up and mailed home. And after about 10 days, they gathered up about 10 of us, the guys who are going to be in the Air Force, and we put us on a train. And about 3 or 4 days later, we wound up down in not Pensacola, but St. Petersburg, Florida. It was 8 degrees below zero when we left Des Moines. I got down to St. Petersburg, and the sun was shining, the palm trees were blowing, and man, it was amazing, something entirely new. So anyway, we went through the preliminaries down there. We were, like in a lot of other cities, the Air Force had commandeered the hotels in St. Petersburg. Some of them actually were big old homes. We had the best hotel in town. It was the Princess Martha Hotel. I think it was about 6 stories high, and it was the biggest hotel in St. Petersburg at that time. And we were on the 5th floor, and there were elevators, but they wouldn't let you use the elevators. You had to run up and down the stairs, which was good exercise, I guess. We had one fellow who was a little older, and it was a great strain on him. He had a hard time. He'd get up about to the third floor, and he was out of wind. But us guys, 18, 19 years old, we had no trouble running up and down the stairs. So we got through basic training at St. Petersburg, wandering through the sand and all. And then there was I think it was about 10 of us that they put on a train. And as far as me being an aircraft mechanic is concerned, that was out the window. They said I was qualified to be a radio operator. So they put us on a train, and we wound up in Chicago, and 8 below zero again. So we were at the Stevens Hotel, which at that time was one of the biggest hotels in the world. And then also there was another large hotel right close, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, but anyway, we were right on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago. We were right across Michigan Avenue from Grant Park, and on the other side of Grant Park was Lake Michigan. And you talk about cold. It was cold there. And this school, it operated 24 hours a day. You were either in a day shift or the night shift. There was no, when I was down in St. Petersburg, the first Christmas I spent in the service, I was on KP. And
does that stand for keep peeling?
Huh?
Does that stand for keep peeling?
No, no, that's keep, actually they had a big ballroom and a dance floor, and they had changed it over to a mess hall, and it probably completely ruined that dance floor. But anyway, it had this old mess sergeant there. He had the guys down there with a scrub brush, a bucket of GI soap and a scrub brush cleaning that floor. I thought to myself at the time, man, this dance floor is not going to be worth a damn when they get done with it. But anyway, I said, getting back to Chicago. Now, in Chicago, there was no KP. The civilians handled all the food. But of course, the school operated 24 hours a day. There was a day shift and a night shift, and you alternated back and forth. All the technical so forth was in classrooms in the basement of the hotel, and for code practice, we had what was called the Coliseum down on South Wabash Avenue. It was about 1.5 miles from the hotel, and we had to march down there and back every day for code practice. And so you talk about being cold. We did calisthenics out in Grant Park. We'd march down, and there was an overhead bridge. We'd cross over to the park, and you took your calisthenics and your heavy overcoat, earmuffs, overshoes, and the whole bit. They issued us canvas and leather overshoes, canvas and rubber overshoes, and it was mighty drafty over there. But we survived, and we got along all right. After I graduated from radio school, then all of the guys that could pass the physical exam and volunteered for gunnery school, they put us on a train, and we wound up down in Fort Myers, Florida, or outside of Fort Myers, Florida, a place called Buckingham Field, which they had just bulldozed up out of the swamps out there. And there was alligators, there was snakes, there was anything and everything you could imagine, rats, cockroaches like you wouldn't believe. And so the thing about Fort Myers was, the interesting thing was, through the summer months, about 4 o'clock every afternoon, it would rain. The barracks had been built with green lumber in the floors. When the lumber dried out, there was big cracks in the floors, and there was all kinds of scorpions used to climb up through the floor. And you had to make sure when you put your clothes on, you make damn sure there wasn't scorpions in your shoes or in your clothes someplace. So it was horribly humid down in there. I say it was right down in the Everglades. So I really enjoyed gunnery school, really. It was kind of fun in a lot of ways. We started out with 22 rifles, and we graduated to 12-gauge shotguns. We shot skeet, we shot trap, and the idea was with the skeet was to teach you how to lead a target. And then we graduated on into 30 caliber machine guns, and then 50 caliber machine guns. And one of the things that was interesting, they had what they called the moving base range, and it was a big high embankment. On the other side of the embankment, running around the concrete track, was a Jeep with some 4x4 sticking up and some sheets on it. And of course, you couldn't hit the Jeep because it was down below the embankment, but the sheets would stick up, and of course, you had different colored ammunition bullets, so you had to shoot that sheet, and of course, afterwards, they would count the different colored bullets that went through the sheet and gave you your score. We flew in the back end of an AT-6 plane. The first trip you went up, they took you up in an AT-6 and they looped you around to see if they could get you airsick. And some of them, if they got airsick too much, they washed them out. But if you could manage, well, you got by all right. So that was a part of our gunnery training, was firing this 30 caliber gun from the rear cockpit of an AT-6 plane into a tow target that was towed by another plane. And then we also did the same thing, except rather than the AT-6, we flew on old A-29 and Lockheed Hudson bombers and shot at tow targets. So anyway, when we finished gunnery school, then they loaded us on a troop train, and between getting sidetracked and standing around here and there and so forth, it took us about 5 days to get from St. Petersburg to Salt Lake City, Utah. And that was where, the Salt Lake City is where they got crews together. But they did give us a 10-day leave from Salt Lake City before they so I got a chance to get home and back again before they put the crews together. But they first gathered the crews together. You had a pilot, a co-pilot, a bombardier, a navigator, a radio operator, and a flight engineer. So they put us on a train, and we wound up in Casper, Wyoming. And then a short time after we were there, we had 4 gunners showed up that were for the crew. So we went through a pretty extensive training there. And we flew days, and we flew nights, and we flew all around the country there, practice dropping bombs and practicing radio op procedure and practicing all kinds of different procedures. It was really to get you ready for combat. So after we had put in a period of time there, then they took our crew and they shipped us to Wendover, Utah, where we joined the 467th Bomb Group. And there again, we did a lot of flying. And unfortunately, out in the mountains out there, as a matter of fact, there was 2 crews of the 467th Bomb Group, and they never figured out why, whether they had engine trouble or what of them, but 2 of them plowed into the mountains out there and killed both crews. So from there on, they transported us to Harrington, Kansas, where we were issued new B-24s. These were B-24H models made by the Ford Motor Company. The plane that we had was 4252535. I'll never forget that serial number. And when we were at Casper, Wyoming, our pilot had just recently got married. And so his wife was there with him, and they had an apartment in town. And she was a real cute little gal, and she would invite the whole crew up to their apartment, and she'd cook spaghetti dinners. So we were quite fond of Catherine. We called her Katie. So when we got our new plane, we named it Katie. So we had Katie painted on the nose of the plane. So after slow timing the engines and all, and to get the plane ready to go, and a lot of more practice, we headed out, we wound up down in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we flew out of there a little bit, doing a little sub patrol, kind of look for submarines to practice. And then when they decided to ship us over, we went from West Palm Beach, Florida to Puerto Rico, and then from Puerto Rico to British Guiana in South America. And then from British Guiana, we went to Belém, Brazil, which is right at the mouth of the Amazon. And then from Belém, we went to Fortaleza, Brazil. And we laid over there for a couple of days while they tuned the plane up and various other things that they had to take care of. one of the interesting things, they had some really nice-looking Brazilian girls that worked on the base. And of course, in Brazil, they speak Portuguese. And of course, some of the guys tried to communicate with these girls, you know. And it was an interesting thing. We sat down at kind of a PX with them one day, and some of the guys were, in a way, kind of badgering these girls, trying to get them to talk, you know. And they would jabber back and forth in Portuguese. And finally, one of them says, I've stood this about as long as I can, and they all got up and left. So, which was quite an eye-opener. So anyway, when we left Fort Laser, Brazil, we're headed for Dakar, French West Africa at the time, and we flew at night. And the reason for that being the navigator could take star shots at the navigation. So we wound up over in Dakar, and this was really an eye-opener. You just never dreamed people lived like that, you know.
Isn't that a Muslim country?
Huh?
Was that a Muslim country at that time?
I don't really know what the religion was. I didn't really have that much association with them. One of the things that really impressed me, or struck me, was the fact they had a bunch of humongous big men, these colored fellas. I don't know what tribe they were in, but God, they were 6'3", 6'4", great big guys. And they had old rusty French rifles with rusty bayonets on them, and they had French uniforms. They didn't wear any shoes. They wore wrap leggings and no shoes. And their feet, they had great big feet, and they looked like they'd been running through that hot sand all their life, you know. And they were really quite interesting. The problem there was the natives would steal anything that they could pick up or pry loose, you know. And so consequently, while we were at Dakar, two of the enlisted men were assigned to stay at the plane at all times, day and night, so that we didn't get everything stolen. I had an experience. It wasn't one of my nights to stay on the plane, but I had forgotten something on the plane, and I started out to get it. And I was coming across this sand lot, and Lord save us, here comes one of these guards, you know, running with his rifle, you know. I had visions of that rusty bayonet going right through me. So I stopped, and the guy ran up to me, and he slammed his rifle down. He saluted me. I saluted him. He smiled, and he turned around and left. Scared me half to death. So anyway, I say that was an experience. One of the things I say, one of the things that was kind of interesting, these natives took a great prize in the GI mattress covers, the white kind of a sheet-like material that they put over the GI mattresses. So they would, of course, guys would steal them damn things and barter with these natives, you know. And they would take that mattress cover, and they'd cut a hole for their head, and two horn would split their arms, and cut the bottom off, and bingo, they had a new suit. And that was a great prize. And you'd have to see these guys walking around in a mattress cover, you know. And anyway, it was a real eye-opener. It was see how the rest of the world lives. Then we left after, well, I think we were there about 3 days. Then we took off for, oh hell.
You know, we'll probably be going along the coast.
Well, no, we went to an air base. I got it on the tip of my tongue, and I can't say it.
You'll think of it when you relax.
Yeah. Anyway, when we were there, actually we had to fly over the Atlas Mountains. And unfortunately, one of our group, whether they had engine trouble or what happened, but anyway, they slammed into the Atlas Mountains and killed the whole crew. And so we were at this other base, which actually had been shared with the British. And the interesting thing was, the British had a bunch of Italian prisoners that they had captured, and they had them in stockade, kind of a brick wall with barbed wire all around at the top. The Americans had a bunch of Italian prisoners they had corralled, and they were out picking up cigarette butts and stuff. They were policing up the area. So, boy, I'm telling you, I'm losing my mind. I can't think of that place. But anyway,
Would you like to stop for a few minutes and get some water and get a drink of water?
no, I don't know whether I had it written down or not. I don't know. I didn't. Marrakesh, Morocco. Marrakesh, Morocco. Yeah, I knew I'd think of it. But at Marrakesh, Morocco, it was quite an interesting place. It was much, somewhat more sophisticated than Dakar was. But even so,
that is a Muslim place.
oh yeah, they had the Kasbah there and all that, and of course that was, we only got off base for just a little bit. The only thing I got there, I was able to buy a billfold with Casablanca printed in it, and which I carried for quite some time. Matter of fact, I still have it. But it was truly an experience. So after we had been at unfortunately one of the things that happened at Marrakesh was the fact that we were getting ready to fly from there to England, and I was on the plane. We had what they call a trailing wire antenna that would lower down and like for example, when we flew across the ocean, we had to use the trailing wire antenna. Well, I was checking out this trailing wire antenna, so I had the plane was parked and I was stretching out the antenna. Some nitwit with a cleat track came along and ran over it and chopped it all up. So I had to round up, get another trailing wire antenna.
Do you recall approximately how long it was?
Seems to me it was about 100 feet, something like that.
100 feet, so that would be what, about 75, that'd be about 60 meters?
Something of that sort, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember just exactly what it was, yeah.
I'm an amateur radio operator, so
yeah, okay, all right,
I'm interested in that stuff.
Yeah, we had, of course, we had, the only time you used it was on real long distance.
For short
Now, we flew from when I was still working South America when I was off the coast of Africa. So anyhow, we from Marrakesh, Morocco, we took off and we flew out over the Bay of Biscay, and we wound up in England at Wales. So we landed at a place named Valley, Wales, an air base there, and then I think we were there for a couple of days, and then we took off and we flew across England just past the city of Norwich to where the 467th Bomb Group was setting up. This was a new bomb group, and they were setting up a station at a place called Rockheath, which was nearly out as far as the North Sea. It was out in that area. It was right close to Norwich, which was in East Anglia. As a matter of fact, practically all of the 8th Air Force was in the East Anglia area because that was flat farmland, and there was they got many air bases right in there. I've got a chart that lists all of them. But anyway, I think when we get our new museum, we'll hang it up. But so there's a lot of things. We went through. I guess we probably spent 2 weeks in training again before we flew any combat missions. The first mission that we flew was we were bombing the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory at Ossersleben, Germany, and I really had a eye-opener there. The first mission that we flew, I damn near got killed. We had a piece of shrapnel came through the side of the plane, right past my head, and slammed into the top turret on fortunately the top turret gunner had the turret around that way, and it hit the armor plate on the turret and dropped down on the flight deck. And Boy, I said that was a wake-up call, I'll tell you.
Is that from the aerial?
That was from a shell, it was probably an 88, German 88. But, you could hear those shells explode, even though past the noise of the airplane and the engine and everything, you could hear those shells exploding when they got in close enough. And the shrapnel hitting the airplane and all. And so, of course, unfortunately, we lost 3 guys on the plane. Well, actually, we lost 4 guys because one of the fellows who had been flying the nose turret, and he had a piece of shrapnel come right through the side of the plane, and darn near took his right leg off, right below the knee. And I helped drag him out of the top turret, the nose turret, and we give him morphine shots and everything. And an interesting thing, we had a medical kit in the kit, and we used the scissors in the medical kit. I've still got that scissors to this day, this medical scissors. I just kept it, and I've still got it. But anyway, I don't know, there's a number of things that happened. One of the early missions that we flew with the 467th Bomb Group was the railroad yards at Ham, Germany. And normally on the bombing missions, we started out early in the morning. And of course, the Americans flew in the daytime in formation, whereas the British would go out at night singly. And the reason that they went out at night, they got shot up so bad in the daytime that they just went out at night. But we had the Norden bomb site, which was the most accurate bomb site in the world, of course, at that time. And in order to use it, you had to get in the daylight. So we would fly in formation and so forth. And the reason you flew in formation was you had more guns to bear on attacking fighter planes. Okay. Of course, the one thing when you're in tight formation, you had to be careful of if you're tracking a fighter plane coming in, that you didn't over-track and shoot down one of your own airplanes. That was one of the hazards. But anyway, on this one particular mission, I think it was about our 4th mission, it was late in the day, and actually they should have scrubbed the mission rather than send us out, but they were sent, and we were bombing the railroad yards at Ham, Germany. And when we got coming back over the French coast, we came in, I guess we came back over the Zuider Zee, really. And you could see the German planes down there fire, the guns going off firing at us. And so we came in over the North Sea, and we were, the guys turned on their running lights so they didn't run into each other, which made a jolly thing for the German fight fighters. We had the ME-110s followed us in, and we didn't realize it. On your plane, you had what they call an IFF, Identify Friend or Foe unit, what you kicked on when you came in over England, and they could pick it up in the radar, so they knew that these were friendly planes. And they knew that there were planes in there that were not friendly. So these anti-aircraft gunners, they were shooting at anything that came around, we were flying the traffic pattern, trying to land, and the plane right ahead of us blew up and went down. And we were cussing the British, damn British shooting us down. What the hell's the matter with them, And it turned out we didn't realize that there was German night fighters in among us. And so we were extremely fortunate. And they shot, the Germans shot down a bunch of B-24s that night. And but it was a stupid thing to send the planes out, because these guys, to keep them running into each other, they turned their clearance lights on. Hell, that's a sitting duck for the Germans. So anyway, that was the last time we did that. And one of the things I was going to mention is, when we were at Casper, Wyoming, there was an instructor pilot there who was unhappy because he was a first lieutenant. He was unhappy because he was stuck in Casper, Wyoming as an instructor pilot. He wanted to get into combat. And I'm trying to think of his name. I had it written down. His name was Ernest Calori, First Lieutenant Ernest Calori. Well, we had flown, I think, 3 or 4, it was about 4 missions, we had flown with the 467th Bomb Group. And lo and behold, who shows up but Lieutenant Calori got the other crew, and he came in as a replacement crew. Well, Lieutenant Calori didn't have a plane assigned to him, so on his first mission he flew Arcady. He got killed on his first mission, and our plane went down in flames. Katie was gone. So there we were without an airplane assigned to us. And at that time, in the 389th Bomb Group, they were starting up the 564th Squadron, which was what they call the PFF, or it was the radar units. And these planes were equipped with radar. We had a radar navigator, we had a dead reckoning navigator, and we had a pilotage navigator that flew the nose gun. So they took two crews from the 467th Bomb Group and transferred them over to the 389th Bomb Group to join this squadron, the 564th Squadron. And of course, we flew as a lead, not only with the 389th, but other bomb groups too. This was the only squadron in the whole 2nd Air Division, which was 14 bomb groups. So we flew as a lead crew for different bomb groups. And as I say, we had three navigators we flew with. The dead reckoning navigator, the pilotage navigator that flew the nose gun, and the radar navigator. And he was on the flight deck behind the pilot. And where had been the ball turret on the plane, on the bottom, they took the ball turret out, and that's where the scanner for the radome was. It lowered down. Of course, that was one of the duties of the radio operator, was to jack that damn thing down and jack it up again so you could land. But the scanner rotated around in that globe. So,
Barney, was that in that airplane? Were y'all up above the normal flight path in that plane, or did y'all stay with the? No,
we flew lead the same way. Yeah, okay. We had. Sometimes we had 2 PFF planes, or sometimes it was only 1 PFF plane. Sometimes, but we flew lead, and of course then we had what they call the wing crews, off to the side and so forth and behind.
And y'all were looking for enemy planes as y'all flew.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, one of the things they got it down to, when we started out, if you flew 25 missions, it was a combat tour. And then when General Doolittle took over the 8th Air Force, he raised it to 30, which made him real popular. And then they changed it, the wing crews, the lead crews were still 30, and the wing crews were 35 missions. They had to fly 35 missions before they committed a tour. So we had, we flew with all the other bomb groups in the second Air Division of the 8th Air Force. And on D-Day, on Normandy, there were 6. The 446 Bomb Group was the first group in over the target area, in over the coast, and there were 6 389th, 564th Squadron PFF planes that flew with them, and we were one of them. We were one of the first planes in over the coast at Normandy. And of course, the weather was terrible. You couldn't see anything. Once in a while, there might be a little break in the clouds, and you could see all those ships down there. But when we went in over the coast, you could see nothing. And unfortunately, one of the last things at briefing they told us is, for God's sake, don't bomb our own people. So unfortunately, a lot of guys, they overshot the target because they were scared to death they were going to hit these guys coming in a landing craft, which was too bad, because these guys were counting on having bomb craters and stuff like that to hide in, and they weren't there. But there was nothing you could do about it, you know. So anyway, as I say, the 446 Bomb Group was the first ones to go in over the coast, but they were accompanied by 6 PFF crews from the 389th and the 564th Squadron. So actually, everybody knew that D-Day was coming sometime soon, but nobody knew exactly when. And we were to take off from Hethel, which was our 389th Bomb Group, and we flew over to the 446th Bomb Group, which was at the town of Bungay. And the night before, we had briefing about 10 o'clock that night, and then we tried to get some sleep, and we took off about 2 o'clock in the morning. We flew out over the Wash, which was the north part of England, and then we formed out over the North Sea. Then we came back over England, and headed for the Normandy, and we were the first ones in over the coast. So I don't know what else of interest, that we managed to survive. There's a lot of things happened. Let's say we lost 3 guys on the crew. We had some replacements. We lost one of the replacements, so he didn't get killed, but we got shot up real bad, and he thought the plane was going down, and he bailed out, and he got captured and was a prisoner of war. It's hard to think of the other things that happened. After we finished our combat mission, I came back. They sent us to Liverpool to wait for a ship. I came back on the Queen Elizabeth, and it was really, when they pulled into New York Harbor and you could see the Statue of Liberty up there, it was really an experience. It was really, it really shook you up. So after I got back, and then we got a 2-week leave to go home after we got back, and then I had to report at Santa Ana, California. And from Santa Ana, California, they shipped me back to Fort Worth, Texas, where the guys were taking 4-engine transition training. The pilots were learning how to fly 4-engine planes. Whenever they flew a cross country, they had to have a radio operator on board. So I didn't really have a whole lot to do. If they had a cross country, I flew out to Tucson or flew up to Washington, D.C. or whatever. We laid overnight and come back the next day, and then I was off until the next trip I was assigned to. So I had a pretty easy time, really. I bought a 37 Chevrolet there in Fort Worth, and I had a great time. So anyway, after I guess there's probably a lot of things that I kind of skipped, maybe I don't know if they're important or not. So anyway, I was still at Fort Worth when the war was over, and